Greetings, my name is Dorothy Ann Cole. I'm delighted to have you watch this video. I'm doing an introduction to nonviolent communication. I hope you enjoy it. Nonviolent communication is also known as the language of peace and the language of compassion. It teaches us how to become more in tune with how we communicate with others, reducing violence and increasing connection or communication. Makes us better people, at least it has for me. Again, my name is Dorothy Ann Cole, and I'm an independent trainer. There are certified nonviolent communication trainers, and then there are those who are learning to do the process. I opted to be independent because I wanted a little more freedom from the requirements that they had to do it. I like doing it my own way. Nonviolent communication is addressing how we use violent phrasing in our society, in our world, and it alienates us from each other. We don't communicate more peacefully, or if we don't connect, we're not as loving and kind and compassionate as we could be because our society, not just in the United States of America, but often worldwide, and you should know this, nonviolent communication is now taught in over 77 countries of the world. Pretty amazing. But the structure of our language is such, and our thinking processes, that we often alienate each other or alienate ourselves from ourselves using violent phrases or communication. So, why I wanted to learn this was because I wanted to improve the quality of my relationships, personally and professionally. And that's panned out. Done a pretty good job at it. I started learning this way back in 2002. So I've been at it for a while. I hope you enjoy this presentation. Let's look at what makes us violent. It starts with our judgments. We are wired to do things where we see things, perceive things as good or bad, right or wrong, appropriate or inappropriate. We're not even necessarily conscious that we're doing this. So let's start off this. This is non-violent, and you can't make any mistakes here. Just know that you're learning how to do it from a different point of view. However, when I ran a practice group, it was on the phone with a group of people who lived in a community, and I went through talking about these things. One of the women got really upset. Because I told her that we often talk to other people by blaming them, telling them it's your fault, you're to blame, how could you? And that we move into labeling and libeling. I think she's too, sassy, or he's too fat, or she drinks too much, or he smokes too much, or. We have all sorts of things that we label people, which libels them. I love this one of he's an alcoholic. How much alcohol does he drink? Does he do it every day? Does he do it out of control? There's a lot of variables in this process. There's a professor in England named Whitcomb who came up with this notion that if you label somebody, particularly kids in schools, like attention deficit hyperactivity disorders and so forth, you actually libel them. And I thought that was a pretty neat thing to identify here, because we have our inner jackal and our inner giraffe. They said animals that Marshall put together to help us figure out who we are. And the jackal represents our violent side, and our giraffe represents our more compassionate side. So when I say I'm so stupid, I'm being violent internally to myself. That's inner jackal. And if I'm being violent to somebody else, I would say you are so stupid. But compassionate discussions would be more like, wow, I'm really sad that I didn't know how to do that. Or I regret I made that mistake. Or, I'm wondering if you're feeling sad because you made that mistake. So it's a different energy. Did you hear the difference? It's not blaming and shaming. We're moving into being more connected. This is another way we do it. We make assumptions about people, and we assume right or wrong in explanations, interpretations, and diagnoses, and so forth. And we also do coercing. which is equivalent to bullying, telling people what they should do, or he deserved that, or we want to punish, we want to put people down. If you don't, I will. So our culture really supports this because our language is based in this way of communicating that actually dates back. I was surprised when Marshall said that according to anthropologists and linguists and so forth, dates back over 8,000 years. So we are really programmed to, in our construct of our language, and not just in English, in many of the languages of the world, to be violent, and we don't even know it. Marshall had a key phrase of when somebody says, I think you should watch out, because anything after that might tend to be a little violent. So one of the red flags he always talked about was the should word. Anybody telling you what you should do is in what we call a power over relationship, meaning that, and there are lots of them in our world. So there's parent-child, teachers-students, police to citizen, government to citizen, boss to worker, and so forth. And what we're talking about here in nonviolent communication is a way to come back to equalizing a relationship. So we're not powering over each other. We engage with the power with relationship. And it's once you start experiencing it, I'll tell you, it's really refreshing. And when you don't, it's not. I'll be very clear about that. Let's look at the nonviolent communication model. There are 4 parts. It's the observations, feelings and needs, and requests. And I teach by Oreo cookie. So this is a representation of an Oreo cookie. That's in America, that is a cookie with chocolate cookies and cream in the middle. The cream, in this case, feelings and needs, represents how we do empathy. We can give empathy, we can receive it, and we can learn to do self-empathy. So really pay attention, because it took me a while to figure out that empathy is the most important part of the NVC process and model. So I say feelings and needs are the creme de la creme of NVC. Now, there are 2 principles I want you to know about. One is our intention is connection, meaning we're going to connect with each other. We're going to have a heart-to-heart. We're going to really hear each other, feel each other, all that. And the second one is that we work in the present moment. So our intention is present. We're not going back and blaming our partner or our friends for something they did last week or last year. We're going to be talking about what's going on with us right now, in the now. And so our attention is always in the present moment. So just be aware to frame yourself into that position. Now, I'd like to contrast what we call jackal land with giraffe land. Some of these concepts were taught to me by lots of other trainers. And the jackal is the way Marshall had us identify our negative, violent selves. And there's an internal jackal and an external jackal. So looking at this, see, now look at that. My blame shame game stuff moved. Well, shoot. So I can go into jackal and say, well, you didn't check that very well. And I can blame myself. You could all blame me and say, well, that wasn't very graphically good, Dorothy. That was bad. You're not doing this right. So we get into this idea that it's okay to criticize. Well, it is in jackal land, but I don't like it. I don't like doing it, and I don't like receiving it. Do you? The contrast is we move it over to giraffe land. So actually, this works for me now when I observe it, because the blame shame game is off kilter. And I think that part of ourselves, whether it's internal or external, is off in our world. So I'm actually pleased that showed up now. See, change happens. Now, the giraffe land is going to be in color, you'll notice that, and we're about truth. And the way we often express our truth is to feel good, talk about feelings. So looking at the previous slide, I was initially disappointed when I saw this going, well, that was not very professional. I would have liked to see that better. Bad. Or I can look at it now and go, well, actually, the lesson is I think Jack-o'-lantern stuff is a little off kilter, so that fits, right? So I'm feeling kind of pleased that I have an example that illustrates the contrast between Jack-o'-lantern and Giraffe-land so beautifully. So that's my truth. I'm happy about it. Surprised you, huh?
Mhm.
Okay, another thing we're going to look at is that jackals often want to find out who's right or wrong. This is a domination culture, and then we punish or reward. It's a pretty amazing process that we engage in particularly well in the United States, because when I was in other countries, I would see examples where they didn't do this. In one of the uh, lessons that I was teaching one point, I had gone up to Canada and done a retreat up there, and there was a newspaper article about someone who'd been wandering around. He was naked, he was drugged out, and he was in a restaurant. So the police came in and arrested him and took him to jail. The next morning, the newspaper reported that they had a talk with him about his inappropriate behavior, that he needed to get some help, and referred him on to a rehab center. In the United States, in contrast, this person would have been arrested, put in jail, hauled into court, charged with a crime, found a lawyer, later set a court date, and then something would have happened, some kind of trial, or maybe some things where he would have been punished for using drugs and or misbehaving in a way that was not proper in the society. So notice the contrast between a compassionate response from the Canadians and a very dominating, uh, violent response from Americans. That's exactly what we're kind of talking about here, is the difference between a domination culture and one who is working with the people, for the people, to help them should make better choices. Fundamentally, that's what it's all about. So what we're here is when jackals work, they're looking to punish or harm, where giraffes are looking for figuring out what everybody needs and find a way that everybody can get their needs met. So in this previous example, obviously this man had mental health problems, one doing drugs and going to places in not appropriately dressed, and he obviously was probably mentally ill or addicted or something going on where he needed help. And so that was a giraffe response. Jackals tend to deny choice. They work on this language of, oh, there's only one way we can do this. They can't, and they insist on having their own way. It's got to be my way or the highway. It's a push, and so they don't recognize that there might be multiple ways of doing things that serve more people in better ways. Individually, it just starts of acknowledging I have a choice. I can do this job or not. I don't want to do this job. I can say that. I can say I don't want to. Now, it's kind of tricky here because if you work for somebody else, you have an agreement, tacit agreement that you're working for them and they're paying you for their time. So, in that context, you have a choice of having a job or not and doing what you're told to do because you have the job and you're getting paid for your time. So it's not, you know, but generally we can have choice, we can do what we want, and we can have fun doing it. And I like it that we do it without causing harm to other people. In Jackal-land, we're all taught to judge and evaluate things. So here's what happened, or she's so hot, he's a wet blanket, you're always so nosy, sorry. Why can't you stifle self? You're so controlling, are typical things that people say or think or judge about others. In Jackal-land, we don't personalize it. We don't say you. That's a good thing to know. That word you often incites that opening to Jackal-land. In Giraffe-land, we take it back. We observe what's going on. We see, we hear, like a video camera. We listen, we remember, and then from the observation, we go to our feelings. And from our feelings, we can figure out what our needs aren't being met in this process. So observation is the first part of the model, as you remember, and it helps us translate to our feelings, what we are really feeling. Now, jackals also perceive scarcity, so we can't meet everyone's needs. If you or me, there's not enough to go around for all of us. So it's very fear-based, and it gets into trouble. Look at this one. We're in competition. We pull, we push and pull. We go through all of this, and what we're going to do is fall right off the hillside here. So this is more the competitive model rather than one of cooperation, collaboration, working together. And so that's what the jackals look to. We perceive abundance now. We can have what we need, and we can share and connect, so everyone gets their needs met. Now, I have to tell you, this was a very alien concept to me. At one point, I was taking a workshop for educators. I was teaching a practice group across town. Our sessions were going to 5:30, and my class started at 7. So an hour and a half to get across town through the traffic, get myself fed and ready for my 7 o'clock class was just really tough. Not enough time. So with the notion of maybe we could talk this through, make a request, I asked if we could change the lunch hour time down to an hour instead of an hour and a half, and then we could leave at 5 o'clock. Well, then there was somebody who didn't like to do that because she really liked that hour and a half for lunch. That gave her some rest time, and other one wanted to connect and socialize a lot. And so neither of them wanted to reduce the lunch hour down to an hour instead of an hour and a half. And then people sat with that for a couple minutes. And then we said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we, how about if we just take the lunch hour and cut it down to an hour and a quarter, and we can leave at 5 o'clock. And anybody who wants to stay and socialize can. And everybody agreed. I got to tell you, I was astonished because this met my need to be able to leave at 5 and get to my class on time and ready for it. And this gave people other social time. And well, we all got our needs met. It was my first time I understand and really experienced this. We can meet everyone's needs. Pretty easy too. It's not about compromise either. It was, we negotiated a way that all of us could feel and experience getting our needs met without any tension or worry or anything. Government needs to learn this process. At least I would like to see that. The other thing we do in jackal land is we blame others. If he hadn't said anything, I would not have lost my job. It's all his fault. Why couldn't he just mind his own business? Now, often people who are doing this, blaming other people, aren't really taking stock of their own behavior here. So, did I show up to work on time? Was I doing my job right? Was I following through? And so forth. So, there's usually more going on than trying to blame somebody else for why you lost your job, or that you did something that was not acceptable to the company or the policies or whatever. So we often want to blame other things, blame other people for things that go wrong in our own lives. And for jackals, that's tough. It's hard. It's a very painful place to be. If you move into the giraffe world, you take responsibility for your feelings and needs, and then you talk about it to yourself. This is self-empathy. I feel because I need. In the course of my career, I've lost several jobs. One I was really upset about. My need for fairness wasn't met. Another one was kind of cheesy because they gave me a time frame. I was a single parent, and they allegedly promoted me into a time space that I couldn't do with a small child. So that didn't meet my need for fairness or consideration. So basically, they were lying to me about wanting to keep me on. That didn't feel good either. In other cases, when I got fired, I was relieved because it wasn't a job I was a match for. So I took responsibility for my own feelings and needs in here. So this is the transition that I'm talking about, that you can see that often if something happens to you, if you assess your own feelings and needs, it's easy to take responsibility for it and observe what's really going on in the bigger picture, if you will. So not blaming somebody else or myself, but saying, yeah, I'm no longer a match for this organization. That's a good thing to know. Now, we all do this one too. We blame ourselves. I don't know how I could have been so stupid. I should have seen it coming. What am I going to do now that I've lost my job? Well, you have a situation. So obviously you've lost your job. You have to think about what you're going to do. Well, obviously you're going to try to get another job, or you're going to redefine your career goals, or you're going to go back to school, or you're going to start another business, or a lot of choices out there. So remember, we talked about having choices. That's freeing for me. It's liberating. Another thing that jackals do is they listen selectively. So they have a lot of giving to other people, suggesting, making advice, what you should do. Marshall will tell you every time you hear somebody say, you should watch out, you're going to hear some violent stuff after that. I was really good at this, giving advice, telling people what to do. I'm very good at analyzing problems and situations. And so, but that didn't give me the right to impose it on everybody else. And that's kind of a harsh judgment coming at myself. But that's where I was. That was how I was, trained in this language, our violent language, to participate. So I didn't realize that I was having this negative effect on people. Uh, and regret it now. But I also now have made some changes, so I don't do this to this degree. I intend to listen and really hear what the person is needing. And sometimes just to be heard or appreciated or respected, or they just need clarity and um, appreciation and recognition. And oh, there's just tons of stuff. I'll tell you, when you start learning to listen and really hear somebody and then give them empathy, oh man, the transformation within them often comes within minutes. And frankly, they love you for it. So learn to listen with empathy is a really key part of what we do in nonviolent communication or language of peace, because our purpose is really to make a heart connection. Not that you have to be lovers or intimate with each other or any of that. It's not about that. It's just that you're a real human being connecting with compassion to another human being. And the phrasing is that you don't tell them what they're feeling, you're asking, you're respecting. So this is a power with relationship, not a power over. So are you feeling sad because you need support? And often you'll hear people say yes. Well, or if you're guessing, because that's what you're doing, and they go, well, no, I don't need support. I want something else, blah, 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 blah. And then you come back and say, well, it sounds like you're feeling perhaps frustrated and maybe you need appreciation. Yeah, I'd really like somebody to recognize what I've been doing. I've been really working hard at this job. So they respond to your empathy, feelings, and need questions, yes or no. And you're not right or wrong here. You're just guessing. You're just attempting to connect to them to make a heart connection. So you can't make any mistakes here. That's lovely. Because you learn by making these guessing statements, and they'll hear you. And once they hear you connecting to them, it's so rare these days that actually people can connect on a heart level, a really authentic, real way. They're going to love you for it. I promise you, I love it. I love giving empathy to people. Now, again, Jacqueline, we do have demands. We make the demands. You have to, my way or the highway. If you don't, you better do as I say, not as I do. I will tell you, making demands actually ended one of my marriages because he did not want to allow me any choice. He just wanted to argue, and it's really his thinking was my way or the highway. So at a point, I just decided I would choose the highway. This is tough, and in contrast, what we do in nonviolent communication is we make requests. So again, we're back to choices and making sure all of our needs are getting met here. So we're really clear about this is what I would like. So, for instance, if I were to ask a friend to say, I have, my shoulders are sore, could you give me a little bit of a back rub here? The friend now has choice, remember? So, friend can say yay or nay, yes or no, and I, as a giraffe, accept that choice. The person can't do it now, doesn't want to, doesn't have to, no obligation. If I get a no response, it's not blaming, shaming, you're bad, you're wrong, you're known for help. I always help you. None of that guilt game. We move into, oh, it's a yay or nay, yay, yes or no. No, okay, then it's up to me to be responsible enough about meeting my own needs. So I go find someone else who would be willing to do this, or I go pay for a massage, or I get in a hot tub, or do something else. I don't demand. I make requests, and the person I'm making a request of has the freedom to choose to or not, or negotiate to do it later. Choices play a key role here. One day I had this guy call me. I don't even remember what the context of the call was. We had not met before. We're having a talk. I guess we're waiting for something. Must have been a customer thing. All of a sudden he says, "What's your favorite food?" And I said, "Popcorn." And this is how he responded. "Oh, you are a carbohydrate addict." Well, that is clearly a judgment. Did you get that? I have to say, I was really shocked and surprised that somebody who did not know me would jump to such a conclusion. But this is jackal behavior. He made a judgment, he jumped to that conclusion, and he told me who and what I was. And all of that was violent. So that's why it didn't sit well for me. And I was beginning to learn nonviolent communication at this time. But so I use this popcorn thing as an example all the time to show that how does he know I'm a popcorn addict? I think he turned me into one because ever after I talk about this. But that's how easy it is to make judgments and diagnoses of other people. So let me show you, have you meet Marshall B. Rosenberg. He's the author and creator of this process and learning and teaching. He passed in 2016, which I was very sad to lose him, but I remember having a conversation with him one point where I told him, I said, nonviolent communication is, on one level, the easiest thing I've ever had to learn, and on another, the hardest thing I've ever had to learn. And he looked at me, he grinned, and he said, "Me too." And that was a really precious moment. He's the author of the book called Nonviolent Communication, The Language of Compassion. I suggest you read it. I think you'll find it quite valuable. But learning the language of peace is really about, you can learn the model, that's the fact, the figures, whatever, but it's a process, and it does take some time to do it. He is also the founder of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and they have lots of resources, books, videos, everything at NVC, and they're a nonprofit, so supporting them would be terrific. In addition, there are lots of, if you go on YouTube and type in nonviolent communication or NVC or any of that, you will find lots of places where they've recorded Marshall working with people, or other trainers have created their own stuff to help people learn this. It is, again, taught in 77 countries of the world and expanding. There's wonderful things going on there. So, if I've inspired you today, here are some of your resources, and I am very pleased that I got to know Marshall when he was alive. And then I developed this in my own way. You want to learn more? Well, I've provided you with this website here called peacemattersnow.org. There are 20 free lessons for you and family and friends and co-workers and everything. The applications are incredible here. Beyond just doing your personal and professional relationships, you can use this to improve those. You learn to give and receive empathy, and then you can treat yourself to self-empathy. I'm using this with people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome to teach them a process of self-empathy and getting to deep, what I call deep empathy, where they can go down and work through, ask those questions over and over. What am I feeling? What am I needing? Over and over again, and experience inner peace, which really is the goal. I think that gets lost in all the teaching I've ever heard. You really want to be able to experience inner peace. Think about that for a minute. Take a deep breath and just, wow, inner peace, inner calm. It's magnificent. It's so wonderful. And in that, you can learn to manage your anger and resolve your guilt. You can vanquish your shame and low self-esteem, ease your depression and hopeless despair. It's a pretty magical process. And better yet, if you haven't, you learn it with a friend who can give you empathy, you can set up having weekly practice sessions with each other where you listen to him or her for half an hour and then they listen to you and do that weekly. It's a great way to practice and learn NVC. And don't forget, peacemattersnow.org is available to everybody in the world because it's on the internet. Isn't that cool? That was my vision, my inspiration. So I'm Dorothy Ann Cole. I'm the author of the book, Peace Matters, Teaching the Language of Peace to the World, and the founder of Peace Matters Now. So 10 free lessons actually turned into 20. And I have been a victim of cybercrime, so the site got destroyed, and then we got it to work again and rebuild it. So it's up and running now here in January 2017. So you can sign up and get free lessons and support to use at home, in your classroom, in your job. It's great for customer service training. It's great for conflict resolution. It's great for a lot of different ways. I truly designed this for kids in schools because as an educator, I wanted to speak to the next generation. But there are so many walks of life that would benefit from learning the language of peace. So I hope you'll help promote it. If you can donate, I would really appreciate that. I have 40 more lessons to go, and I'm having to work my retirement. So this would help me a lot to have people really support me, and so I can make the time to finish these other lessons. It's my lifelong legacy to you and to the world. Thank you for listening.